While my husband was deployed overseas, I thought his best friend Marcus was helping save our crumbling marriage. But he was secretly drugging my coffee, installing hidden cameras, spying on me, and slowly manipulating our daughter to turn against me. I didn't realize he was the one destroying everything until I uncovered the disturbing evidence that exposed all of his twisted secrets. Jake had departed for Afghanistan 3 months prior to these events, and the lingering anxiety from his initial deployment was already straining our bond. He persistently questioned my interactions and daily activities with Emma, our 3-year-old daughter. Marcus volunteered to assist with repairs and unexpected issues, given his remote IT work. Jake, surprisingly, endorsed this, describing Marcus as a brother. The initial warning sign should have been Marcus's detailed inquiries about my daily routine and when I was alone. However, I dismissed it as him being thorough in his offer of help. When Jake's video calls began to frequently disconnect, I was relieved when Marcus proposed to resolve our internet issues. He spent an hour adjusting the router, and suddenly, everything functioned more efficiently. Unbeknownst to me, he had just gained the ability to monitor my entire online activity. Marcus started appearing with coffee in the mornings, always with a plausible excuse, such as verifying the faucet repair or bringing new toys for Emma. He would stand uncomfortably close when demonstrating things on my laptop, his hands unnecessarily brushing against mine. I convinced myself it was mere friendliness, but an unsettling sensation arose from the way his gaze tracked me across the room. During our second week, Jake's calls became less frequent, and when he did connect, he seemed suspicious, inquiring if anyone had been assisting me and why I appeared fatigued. I mentioned Marcus had been fixing things, and Jake's expression became peculiar, but the call ended before I could elaborate. Marcus began staying for dinner, often bringing wine to help me unwind after demanding days with Emma. He would ask about my emotions and listen intently as I spoke of feeling invisible as a military spouse, as if I were dissolving into merely being Jake's wife and Emma's mother. When I finally realized he was recording these discussions on his phone, he asserted he wished to recall everything to relay to Jake later. The photographs commenced innocently enough, with Marcus capturing images of Emma at play or me preparing dinner, ostensibly for Jake. Yet, I observed him deleting some immediately. When questioned, he claimed they were indistinct. Upon attempting to alter our Wi-Fi password, Marcus physically obstructed my access to the computer, stating it would only complicate Jake's calls. His voice held an unfamiliar sharpness. He stood so near I could perceive his breath on my neck. The military spouses in our community began treating me differently. I remained perplexed until I overheard Marcus informing Sarah next door that he was concerned about my mental well-being and that Jake had requested him to keep an eye on matters. He was subtly portraying himself as the compassionate friend worried about the struggling military wife. Marcus initiated comprehensive documentation with his camera, taking pictures during Emma's tantrums when the house was disheveled or when I appeared utterly drained after sleepless nights. Jake's calls transformed into interrogations about my conversations and activities. I then understood Marcus was providing him with information, but distorting it to sound suspicious. When my neighbor Mike assisted with groceries, Marcus photographed it and conveyed to Jake that I seemed to be developing a close relationship with the neighbor. The breaking point arrived when I discovered Marcus's notebook in his vehicle, filled with meticulous observations of my routine, Jake's reactions to various pieces of information, and strategies for what to communicate to Jake next. Pages contained notes about my vulnerabilities and how to exploit Jake's pre-existing paranoia from PTSD. When I confronted Marcus, he did not deny anything, but insisted he was safeguarding me from Jake's paranoia and that Jake was already convinced I was having an affair, so why resist? He seized my phone when I attempted to contact Jake and informed me Jake was on a 2-week communications blackout anyway. He claimed any evidence I tried to present would merely confirm I was experiencing a breakdown and becoming paranoid. I recoiled from Marcus in my kitchen as he pocketed my phone. Emma's voice from upstairs broke the tension, and Marcus's expression shifted to feigned concern. He smoothed his features into that practiced look of worry I had witnessed him use with the neighbors. The transformation was so swift it sent shivers down my spine. Marcus moved to block the doorway to the stairs, his hand resting on the router he had installed on the counter. The small black box with its blinking light suddenly appeared ominous. He spoke softly, calmly, as if addressing a startled animal. He instructed me to put Emma to bed and return downstairs. His fingers drummed against the router as he explained that if I did not cooperate, he would be compelled to inform Jake about all our deleted conversations. The ones where I had expressed feeling overwhelmed, the ones he had screenshotted before I could erase them. My heart pounded as I realized Marcus had been recording our entire confrontation on his phone. I noticed it propped against the fruit bowl, camera facing us. Any aggressive reaction from me would be edited to support his narrative. He had been planning this, orchestrating every moment. The whine, the empathetic listening, the helpful repairs. All of it leading to this snare. Emma called again, more insistently. This time, I had to go to her. But leaving Marcus alone downstairs with access to everything terrified me. As I ascended the stairs, I caught movement through Emma's bedroom window. Mrs. Chun, my elderly neighbor across the street, stood at her window observing. She must have witnessed Marcus seizing my phone through the kitchen window. Our gazes met for a fleeting moment before I had to avert mine. I tucked Emma into bed, my hands trembling as I smoothed her hair. She inquired why Uncle Marcus was visiting so late. I whispered that we might visit Grandma tomorrow, keeping my voice light even though I knew Marcus was listening from downstairs. Emma's eyes brightened at the mention of Grandma. I kissed her forehead and promised we would discuss it in the morning. Returning downstairs, I discovered Marcus typing on my phone. He had already dispatched a message to Jake about me experiencing another anxiety episode and how Marcus was assisting. The words on the screen made me appear unstable, dependent, as if I could not manage deployment without constant support. Marcus then displayed his laptop screen. Every website I had visited glowed on the monitor. Every email draft, even the ones I had never sent. My deleted search history concerning emotional abuse and gaslighting, all meticulously cataloged with timestamps. I lunged for the laptop, desperate to erase the evidence of my research. Marcus yanked it away, and his fingers flew across the keyboard. Before I could stop him, he had emailed the browsing history to Jake with the subject line, concerning behavior patterns. The send confirmation felt like a blow to my stomach. He was constructing a case against me using my own attempts to comprehend what was occurring. Marcus continued his digital assault, texting mutual friends from my phone to cancel tomorrow's playdate. He cited my need for solitude to work through some issues. Each message was perfectly crafted to sound like me, but subtly off, as if I were spiraling. I watched helplessly as he systematically severed my connections to my support system. A text appeared on Marcus's phone from Sarah next door. She inquired if I was all right because the messages did not resemble my usual texts. The first fissure in his control emerged as his jaw tightened. While he typed a reassuring reply about deployment stress, I noticed Emma's old tablet in the toy basket. The one Marcus was unaware had cellular data because Jake had configured it months ago for emergency video calls. Mrs. Chen knocked on the door, requesting to borrow sugar. Marcus answered, positioning himself between me and the door. Her eyes absorbed everything. His blocking posture, my pallid face, the way his hand gripped my shoulder when he drew me close. Her hand trembled slightly as she extended her measuring cup. Marcus smoothly explained I was managing deployment stress, his fingers digging into my shoulder as a warning. After Mrs. Chen departed, I recalled something. An old voicemail from Jake before deployment. I had preserved it because he had sounded so earnest. He had told me if Marcus ever made me uneasy, I should contact his ex-wife Diane. She would comprehend. At the time, I had considered it a peculiar statement. Now, it felt like a lifeline Jake had extended before I drowned. The subsequent days blurred into a meticulous dance of surveillance and pretense. Marcus accompanied me to the commissary, where he casually mentioned to the FRG leader how overwhelmed I seemed during his visits. Seeds of apprehension were sown with surgical precision. My part-time employer called while Marcus was at the house. He answered my phone and informed them I required extended leave for mental health treatment. By the time I discovered this, it was too late to clarify. The military chaplain approached me at the commissary later that week. He gently suggested I consider counseling for deployment anxiety. Marcus had been feeding him narratives for weeks, constructing a story of a struggling military wife disintegrating without her husband. The systematic isolation was succeeding precisely as Marcus had planned. I began utilizing Emma's tablet in the bathroom, the sole location Marcus did not follow me. My hands trembled as I took screenshots of pages from his notebook. Marcus called through the door, inquiring if I was all right, his voice laden with false concern. I flushed the toilet and ran water to conceal the sound of my frantic screenshotting. The tablet's photo application revealed something that sent a chill down my spine. Marcus had been in our residence when I was absent. Selfies at our computer, photographs of him rummaging through drawers, timestamps indicating 2 a.m., 3 a.m. visits. The intrusion was more profound than I had realized. He had been observing us, learning our lives intimately. At preschool pickup, Emma's teacher pulled me aside. She mentioned Marcus had called about me, appearing overwhelmed. Other parents cast concerned glances my way, the kind reserved for someone on the brink. My standing in the community was being tainted incrementally, conversation by conversation. I started tracking Marcus's visits. His vehicle appeared at our house daily for precisely 3 to 4 hours, sufficient time to establish presence, but not arouse suspicion. The exactness of it unnerved me. This was not impulsive or emotional. This was calculated, methodical destruction. Mrs. Chun intercepted me checking the mail one afternoon. She glanced around before speaking quietly. Her security camera had captured Marcus entering our house at 2 a.m. last week. She had saved the footage to her cloud before he noticed her camera. Her daughter, Lisa, was a social worker. She added meaningfully. She recognized these patterns. I displayed the notebook photos on Emma's tablet to Mrs. Chun. Her expression hardened as she read. Lisa would want to examine these, she stated. The manipulation patterns were textbook. We arranged for me to meet Lisa discreetly, away from Marcus's surveillance. Marcus's control intensified. He texted from my phone to cancel my appointment with a base mental health clinic. I wasn't ready to talk yet, the message stated. Every avenue for assistance was being systematically closed, but fissures were appearing in his flawless scheme. Emma began conversing with Mrs. Chun during their fence-side chats. She mentioned that Uncle Marcus had said Mommy was unwell and might have to go away to get better. He was preparing my daughter for my removal, planting seeds in her innocent mind. The realization struck me like icy water. This was not merely about controlling me or ruining my marriage. Marcus was positioning himself to usurp my role in my family. Marcus suggested I compose an email to Jake explaining my struggles while he observed over my shoulder. His fingers hovered near the keyboard, poised to guide my words. The phrases he dictated sounded clinical: detached, depression, inability to connect with Emma, thoughts of needing professional help. I recognized the terminology from an article about postpartum psychosis I had glimpsed on his laptop during the router setup weeks ago. My stomach churned as I typed each word, understanding now that he had been devising this narrative since before Jake's deployment. Sarah mentioned something unsettling when we crossed paths taking out trash. Her husband Tom had seen Marcus at our house at 3 a.m. 2 months prior, but assumed it was an emergency repair. The timeline disoriented me. Marcus had been invading our home long before I had perceived anything amiss. Tom had even waved, believing he was being neighborly. Marcus had waved back, as composed as ever, in the middle of the night. Emma's teacher surprised me by declining Marcus's request to be added as an emergency contact. She clarified that both parents needed to provide written authorization for any alterations. Marcus had attempted to persuade her I was too overwhelmed to manage the paperwork, but the school's policy remained firm. Small victories like this offered me hope that not every system could be manipulated. I printed Marcus's browsing history from Emma's tablet during a library visit. The searches made my skin crawl: military spouse mental health holds, emergency custody during deployment, temporary guardianship procedures. Each search correlated with his visits to our house. He had been investigating how to legally remove me while seated at my kitchen table, sipping my coffee, feigning friendship. Military legal assistants crushed my hopes when I attempted to report Marcus. They explained they could only act on offenses against military personnel or incidents on base property. Since Marcus was a civilian operating off base, I required civilian authorities. The lawyer's sympathetic expression offered no solace when she explained the evidence requirements. Screenshots and security footage were insufficient without a demonstrable crime. Emotional manipulation was not unlawful. Mrs. Chin's daughter, Lisa, immediately recognized Marcus's pattern when we met at a park across town. She had encountered similar instances in her social work: predators who targeted vulnerable women during deployments. Lisa offered to maintain discreet contact, providing guidance on meticulously documenting everything. She instructed me on how to create evidence trails that would withstand scrutiny if custody ever became an issue. Jake's old laptop revealed another layer of transgression. Marcus had installed monitoring software months ago, prior to deployment. Every email Jake sent, every video call schedule, every mission blackout date. Marcus knew it all. This explained his impeccable timing, how he always knew when Jake would be unreachable, when doubts would fester longest without communication. Diane responded to my Facebook message within hours. Marcus's ex-wife had been anticipating for years someone else to see through him. She possessed recordings from their marriage, the identical phrases, the same tactics, the same systematic isolation. Her hands trembled as we met at a coffee shop 2 towns away. She had lost custody of their children due to his documentation. No one had believed her then. Marcus brought dinner that evening, behaving as if nothing had changed. I compelled myself to appear appreciative, exhausted, embodying the role he had assigned me. He texted Jake from my phone that I was finally accepting assistance. The message included a photograph of me looking worn down. He had captured it when I was not looking, catching me at my least flattering angle. Shadows beneath my eyes were emphasized. Jake's unit blackout unexpectedly extended by 48 hours. The information arrived through official spouse channels. Operational security precluded communications. This afforded me a crucial advantage. Marcus was unaware of the extension. He believed Jake would be calling in 12 hours. I had 2 additional days to prepare without Marcus's interference. Tom approached Sarah with concerns about Marcus. He had been uneasy with how Marcus probed for information about our family, asking intrusive questions about my mental state, my friendships, my daily routine. Tom had begun recording their conversations weeks ago, his instincts telling him something was amiss. Sarah's eyes widened as she listened to the recordings on Tom's phone. Marcus's facade crumbled during a visit when Emma mentioned missing Daddy. He snapped, "Daddy might not come back," his voice harsh and bitter. Emma's face crumpled. Marcus immediately corrected himself, smoothing his features back into false concern, explaining he meant Daddy was very occupied helping people. But Emma had perceived the truth in that moment of lost control. She remained close to me for the remainder of his visit. He offered to take Emma for the weekend so I could rest. His suggestion sounded reasonable, even caring. I insisted I needed my daughter with me, observing his jaw clench in frustration. He attempted different angles. Wouldn't it be pleasant to have some alone time? Didn't I trust him with Emma? Wasn't he practically family? Each refusal tightened his smile, hardened his eyes. Sarah, Tom, and Mrs. Chun initiated a subtle communication network. They texted updates on Marcus's movements, his vehicle's location, unusual activities. The informal surveillance aided me in tracking patterns. Marcus consistently parked where he could observe both my front door and Emma's bedroom window. He repositioned his car every few hours to avoid suspicion, but always maintained sightlines. Lisa reviewed the documented pattern during another discreet meeting. She identified Marcus's ultimate objective with chilling clarity: establish me as unfit, become Emma's temporary guardian during Jake's deployment, and control Jake through Emma upon his return. The plan was sophisticated, patient, designed to appear as natural concern. Lisa had witnessed fathers returning from deployment to find their entire support system turned against them, their children referring to another man as Daddy. The FRG leader admitted to Sarah that she had only heard Marcus's version of events. She was willing to listen to my perspective privately. We met in her minivan in the commissary parking lot. As I presented the evidence, her expression shifted from skepticism to horror. She had been manipulated, used as a weapon against another military spouse. Her apology was accompanied by promises to quietly rectify the narrative she had been disseminating. Diane's recordings unveiled the extent of Marcus's pattern. He had employed identical phrases about her mental state, concerning behavior, inability to cope, needs professional help. The documentation he had created during their marriage appeared eerily similar to what he was constructing against me. Same formatting, same language, same progressive escalation. She had preserved everything, hoping someday it would matter. Mrs. Chen offered her guest room if I needed to depart swiftly. She understood the risk of Marcus's retaliation but chose protection over personal safety. Her own daughter had survived an abusive relationship. She recognized the indicators, the meticulous control, the slow tightening noose. Her spare key entered my pocket, a pledge of refuge if required. Emma's drawings at preschool caused her teacher to pause. Uncle Marcus being mean to Mommy. Stick figures depicting a tall man with angry eyebrows standing over a weeping woman. The teacher carefully documented each drawing, dating them, filing them according to mandatory reporting protocols. She could not act on them yet, but she was compiling her own evidence file. I documented everything Marcus did openly instead of attempting to access his devices illicitly. Every visit was logged: arrival time, departure time, what he touched, where he went in my house, photographs of his car from my window, screenshots of texts he sent from my phone, recordings of Emma discussing what Uncle Marcus said, constructing a counter-narrative to his careful fabrication. Marcus asserted I was not feeding Emma appropriately during one visit. Emma immediately recited everything she had consumed that day: cereal, banana, sandwich, carrots, chicken nuggets, green beans, yogurt. Her innocent recitation caused Marcus to stammer. He attempted to recover, suggesting perhaps I should record her meals to ensure she received proper nutrition. Emma declared she did not like Uncle Marcus telling falsehoods about Mommy. Children's honesty became my unexpected asset. Tom's recordings captured Marcus inquiring in detail about base mental health procedures. How long did evaluations take? What triggered mandatory holds? Who made decisions about fitness for childcare? Tom had feigned ignorance, allowing Marcus to disclose his research. The conversation demonstrated clear premeditation, planning that extended back months. Sarah's sister worked at the coffee shop where Marcus met someone in a suit weekly. They consistently sat where Marcus could observe our house through the window. The meetings lasted precisely 1 hour. The suited man took notes while Marcus spoke, occasionally showing him documents. Sarah's sister could not overhear the conversations, but noticed Marcus always paid in cash, never with cards. Multiple neighbors began comparing notes about Marcus's narratives. He had recounted different versions of my condition to each person, depression to some, anxiety to others, potential substance abuse hinted at to a few. The falsehoods started intersecting as neighbors conversed. Mrs. Chun heard about my supposed drinking problem the same day Tom was informed about my depression medication. The contradictions exposed his manipulation. Lisa connected me with a private therapist who specialized in documentation for custody cases. The therapist understood the game Marcus was playing. She helped me create professional records demonstrating my mental stability, my strong bond with Emma, my appropriate coping strategies for deployment stress. Every session became evidence that I was seeking assistance proactively, not spiraling, as Marcus claimed. Marcus confronted me about the neighbors observing him. His voice remained controlled, but his hands clenched and unclenched. He was aware of the text chain, the discussions, the growing recognition of his presence. He accused me of turning people against him when he had only attempted to help. The victim narrative flowed so naturally from him. I wondered how many times he had performed this role. The FRG leader apologized publicly at a spouse meeting, carefully avoiding specific names but addressing harmful gossip about struggling spouses. 3 other women approached her afterward, sharing that they had felt uncomfortable around Marcus during their husbands' deployments. His pattern emerged more clearly. Always helpful at first, always gradually increasing presence, always creating documentation. Marcus's lawyer contact abandoned him after learning about Diane's recordings. The suited man ceased meeting him at the coffee shop. Without legal representation, Marcus's foundation began to crumble. He could not file for emergency custody without counsel. His meticulously constructed case required professional presentation to succeed. I watched him scramble for alternatives, his confidence fracturing. Diane revealed Marcus's initial attempt 8 years prior with another military wife. The husband had returned early from deployment unexpectedly. Marcus had vanished from their lives immediately, leaving behind bewildered friends who had been told the wife was unstable. That family had relocated to another base soon after, never realizing how close they had come to ruin. I maintained the appearance of accepting Marcus's help while ensuring Emma was never alone with him. When he offered to take her to the park, I suddenly needed to go as well. When he suggested picking her up from preschool, I had already made arrangements with Mrs. Chun. Every attempt to separate us failed, but I made each refusal seem like coincidence rather than strategy. The preschool implemented new policies after the teacher shared concerns with the director. Any pickup changes required written notification from enrolled parents only. Emergency contacts necessitated multiple forms of verification. The institutional protection felt like armor. Systems Marcus could not charm or manipulate his way through. Marcus's isolation attempts failed as the neighbor network ensured someone always happened to drop by during his visits. Sarah needed to borrow vanilla. Tom wished to check if we had seen their cat. Mrs. Chun brought cookies she had inadvertently baked too many of. Each interruption tightened Marcus's jaw, strained his smile. He could not sustain his performance with an audience. The mailman mentioned to Tom that Marcus had attempted to place a hold on my mail. He had claimed to be assisting during a family emergency, but could not provide proper identification or authorization. The Postal Service required specific forms that Marcus lacked. Another system that protected me through bureaucracy. Red tape became my unexpected ally. Other military spouses began reaching out after the FRG leader's discreet corrections. They offered support, shared their own deployment struggles, created a network Marcus had not anticipated. His narrative of my isolation crumbled as more people checked on me directly instead of accepting his version of events. The military community's strength lay in its connections, and those connections were reforming around truth. Mrs. Chin's security footage compilation revealed a disturbing pattern. Marcus's 3 a.m. visits corresponded precisely with days Jake had missions. The blackout schedules Marcus had accessed through the monitoring software guided his invasion timing. He entered our home when he knew Jake could not call, when evidence of his presence would go unnoticed. The premeditation shown in those timestamps chilled me. Jake's blackout would conclude in 18 hours. I faced a critical decision. Maintain Marcus's trust to gather more evidence or risk everything by alerting the neighbors about what was impending. Marcus would escalate once Jake could communicate again. His meticulously crafted narrative needed to reach Jake before I could counter it. The countdown pressure made every minute feel vital. Emma confided in Mrs. Chun something that altered everything. Uncle Marcus had said Daddy loved Emma more than Mommy. He had promised to care for her when Mommy went away. The words unveiled his true intention, not merely to remove me, but to replace me. He was no longer positioning himself as a concerned friend. He was positioning himself as a paternal figure, preparing Emma for a new family structure. The stakes crystallized with Emma's innocent disclosure. Marcus was not just isolating me or destroying my marriage. He was creating a scenario where Jake would return from deployment to discover his wife mentally incompetent and his closest friend as the stable caregiver who had stepped in. Jake would require support dealing with his unstable wife. Marcus would be present, already bonded with Emma, already integrated into their lives. The long-term manipulation took my breath away. Marcus announced he was staying the night for support. His tone brooked no argument. A concerned friend making a reasonable decision. I calmly agreed, excusing myself to use the bathroom where I texted the network from Emma's tablet. My acceptance of his presence seemed to relax him. He was unaware the neighbors were establishing a rotation, ensuring someone would always be awake, watching, ready. Sarah posted in the spouse Facebook group about supporting deployed families without overstepping boundaries. The discussion she generated never explicitly mentioned Marcus, but it established clear distinctions between appropriate assistance versus intrusion. Spouses shared stories about helpful friends who had crossed lines, about documentation that had been distorted, about the vulnerability of deployment periods. The community education occurred organically, protection spreading through shared awareness. The accumulated evidence painted an undeniable picture. Multiple witnesses, professional documentation, recorded patterns of behavior, institutional confirmations, all demonstrated systematic manipulation rather than concerned friendship. No single piece would persuade skeptics, but collectively they formed an overwhelming narrative. Marcus had been too thorough, left too many traces, involved too many people in his deception. Marcus made his next move, contacting base family services about my deteriorating condition, but the intake worker adhered to protocol, scheduling a home visit rather than taking immediate action. The system Marcus had studied operated slowly, requiring multiple assessments, professional evaluations, due process. His urgency encountered bureaucratic slowness. The very procedures he had researched now worked against his timeline. Desperate, Marcus texted Jake's squad leader about his concerns. He was unaware the leader's wife was part of our support network. She had been observing the situation unfold, sharing information with her husband. The military chain of command that Marcus attempted to exploit became another obstacle. Personal matters during deployment went through specific channels, and Marcus was not in that chain. The squad leader's wife cautioned me about Marcus's attempt to create official documentation through military channels. Her husband had already decided to redirect Marcus to appropriate resources rather than take action. The squad leader understood deployment stress, knew the game some individuals played during vulnerable times. His protective stance toward his soldiers' families extended to safeguarding us from Marcus's manipulation. Jake's squad leader informed Marcus that personal matters should await Jake's return. The dismissal was professional but firm. Military leadership protected deployed soldiers' families from external drama when feasible. Marcus's attempts to create urgency to force immediate action met institutional resistance. The same military structure he tried to use against me now stood as a barrier to his plans. The neighbor network solidified into something more robust than mere surveillance. Scheduled check-ins transformed into coffee visits. Code words for emergencies became genuine friendships. What began as protection evolved into community. Marcus had inadvertently created the very support system he had tried to prevent. His actions had bonded us, given us common purpose, shown us the strength in standing together. 3 more military wives came forward with accounts of feeling uneasy around Marcus during deployments. The pattern extended back years, always helpful initially, always gradually increasing presence, always creating documentation about struggles. Some husbands had returned to find their wives' reputations damaged, their support systems questioning their stability. None had realized they shared the same helpful friend until now. Lisa assisted me in compiling a timeline demonstrating how Marcus's actions escalated with Jake's deployment schedule, pre-deployment positioning, early deployment friendship building, mid-deployment documentation creation, late deployment crisis manufacturing. The pattern was consistent across multiple families. His approach had been refined through practice, each failure teaching him to be more cautious, more patient, more thorough. Mrs. Chin confronted Marcus directly outside our house. Her small frame trembled, but her voice remained steady as she informed him she knew what he was doing. She possessed proof, she had witnesses, and she would not permit him to harm another family. Marcus's face paled as she enumerated specific incidents. The 3 a.m. visits, the mail interference, the conversations with Emma. His mask completely slipped as he grasped the extent of what we knew. Tom revealed he had been documenting everything in case I required witnesses. His recordings included Marcus's middle-of-the-night surveillance, the questions about mental health procedures, the systematic information gathering. Tom had filled 3 notebooks with observations, dates, times, license plate positions. His military background was evident in the meticulous detail. He had recognized an enemy reconnaissance operation when he saw one. The preschool's documentation of Emma's comments and drawings provided crucial third-party evidence. The teacher had followed mandatory reporting protocols, creating an official paper trail that existed outside Marcus's influence. Each drawing was dated, witnessed, filed according to state regulations. The institutional validation carried weight that personal observations could not match. Diane provided her lawyer's contact and years of documentation about Marcus's manipulation patterns. She had preserved everything: emails, texts, recordings, court documents from their custody battle. The lawyer had represented other women in similar situations. She understood predatory patterns, knew how to present evidence effectively. Diane's willingness to testify about Marcus's history added another layer to our defense. The support network collectively decided Marcus was no longer welcome in their homes or social gatherings. The decision spread organically through the military spouse community. Birthday parties, barbecues, coffee mornings. Marcus found himself excluded without formal announcement. Social exile occurred quietly but effectively. The community protected itself through collective action. Marcus snapped and left a voicemail on my phone. His voice shook with fury as he threatened to disclose everything about me and the neighbors' conspiracy to Jake. The mask had finally slipped entirely. I forwarded the recording to everyone in the network. The menacing tone, the accusations, the barely controlled anger. It exposed the real Marcus beneath the helpful friend facade. He attempted damage control immediately, claiming I had pushed him too far. He sent texts to mutual friends saying I had orchestrated a campaign against him. Some peripheral community members wondered if there was truth to his assertions. Doubt crept into the network as people questioned whether they had been manipulated. The uncertainty caused some supporters to waver. At 3 a.m., I lay awake, aware Marcus sat in his car outside. The familiar silhouette in the driver's seat had become my nightly companion. I documented his presence from behind my curtains, adding to the surveillance log. Emma slept peacefully, oblivious to the predator observing our house. I chose to remain rather than flee to Mrs. Chen's, maintaining my position while accumulating evidence. Jake's unit entered a brief administrative period between missions. The communication window opened unexpectedly, 2 hours of potential contact before the next blackout. My hands trembled as I composed a simple message with Mrs. Chen's number. I kept it concise, direct, impossible to misinterpret. The message dispatched successfully just before the window closed again. Marcus arrived at 6 a.m., pounding on my door. His face was contorted with rage as he demanded to know why Jake had contacted Mrs. Chen instead of him. The meticulous narrative he had constructed was crumbling. His control over information flow had shattered. He had lost the ability to filter Jake's perception of events. In his panic, Marcus disclosed something crucial. He had been intercepting my physical letters at the post office using Jake's power of attorney paperwork. Jake had signed it before deployment, trusting his closest friend to assist with emergencies. Marcus had twisted that trust into a weapon, controlling even our written communication. The admission emerged in his desperate attempt to comprehend how his plan had failed. Sarah arrived with coffee, feigning a planned morning visit. Her timing was impeccable. Marcus had been cornering me, his body language increasingly aggressive. Sarah's cheerful greeting and casual entrance diffused the immediate threat. She positioned herself between us while maintaining the pretense of a social call. Marcus's aggression escalated despite Sarah's presence. He lunged for my phone, attempting to view Jake's messages. I recoiled, and he surged forward. The physical boundary had been breached. I had to choose between defending myself and preserving the moral high ground. Years of deployment had taught me patience, strategy, the long game. I scooped up Emma and secured us in her bedroom. Marcus pounded on the door while Emma cried in confusion and fear. Sarah's voice carried through the door as she called Tom and activated the network. I held my daughter, whispering reassurances while documenting the sounds of Marcus attempting to force open the door. Tom arrived with 3 other neighbors within minutes. Their voices joined Sarah's in the hallway. Marcus's shouts about me having a breakdown were met with calm requests for him to depart. The witnesses observed his aggression, his loss of control, the true man behind the facade. His concerned friend act crumbled as he raged about conspiracy and manipulation. The group physically blocked Marcus from reaching Emma's door. Their human barrier compelled him to retreat. I could still hear him shouting about how I had turned everyone against him, how he had only tried to help, how Jake would learn the truth. The victimhood narrative persisted even as his actions revealed the predator. My phone rang. Jake on a satellite connection. I put him on speaker so he could hear Emma crying, the neighbors describing Marcus's behavior, the chaos in our home. Jake's voice was steady as he instructed Tom to remove Marcus from the property. The real-time witnessing of Marcus's meltdown provided undeniable proof of the truth. Marcus finally retreated to his vehicle as more neighbors emerged from their homes. The commotion had attracted attention. His audience grew larger, rendering it impossible to maintain any pretense. He sat in his car for 20 minutes, engine running, observing the house. The neighbors remained outside, forming a protective barrier until he eventually drove away. The base commander's wife learned about the situation through the spouse network. She ensured Marcus was added to the installation's banned persons list. He could no longer access base facilities, family support services, or any military spouse events. The official exclusion removed his capacity to target other military families through official channels. Jake arranged emergency leave through the Red Cross. The process took days, but knowing he was returning home transformed everything. The community devised a safety plan for the interim, scheduled check-ins, rotating presence at our house, documented surveillance of Marcus's movements. The protection network operated with military precision. Diane's lawyer dispatched a cease and desist letter signed by 12 witnesses. The legal document outlined his pattern of harassment, stalking, and manipulation. It referenced the evidence compiled by multiple families over years. The threat of legal action, if he continued contact with any of us, carried substantial weight, supported by extensive documentation. Marcus made one final attempt to salvage his plan. He sent emails to Jake's command alleging I was mentally unstable and had turned the community against him. The squad leader, already briefed by his wife, forwarded the emails to Jake as evidence of Marcus's continued harassment. The military chain of command that Marcus had tried to exploit became another wall protecting us. The preschool director filed a formal report about Marcus's attempts to gain unauthorized access to Emma. The documentation joined the growing official record. Child Protective Services opened a file, not on me, but on Marcus's concerning behavior around children. His name entered systems that would flag future attempts to work with vulnerable populations. Tom organized the men in the neighborhood to maintain subtle surveillance. They documented Marcus's drive-bys, his attempts to approach other military spouses, his presence at locations I frequented. The log expanded daily, each entry witnessed and dated. Marcus could not move through the community without being observed and recorded. Sarah coordinated with the other military spouses to share Marcus's photograph and tactics. The warning spread through private spouse groups across multiple bases. Women shared their own encounters. Pattern recognition propagated rapidly. Marcus's ability to target new victims diminished as awareness grew. Jake's emergency leave was approved for 2 weeks. He would arrive in 3 days. The countdown felt different now, anticipation instead of dread. I prepared for his return by organizing the evidence chronologically. Diane's recordings, the neighbor testimonies, the institutional documentation, everything ready to display the full scope of Marcus's deception. Marcus's vehicle appeared less frequently as social pressure mounted. Local businesses had been quietly informed about the situation. He found himself unwelcome at the coffee shop where he had held meetings, the gym where he had exercised, the restaurants where he had dined. Economic and social exile complemented the legal warnings. Emma's nightmares about Uncle Marcus breaking doors necessitated careful handling. The preschool counselor provided resources for assisting children in processing frightening experiences. Emma's resilience astonished me as she informed Mrs. Chun that Uncle Marcus was in timeout for being mean. Children's ability to simplify complex situations into basic right and wrong provided clarity. The military police initiated an investigation into Marcus's unauthorized use of power of attorney documents. Fraud charges were possible, though prosecution would require time. The investigation itself created another official record of his actions. Law enforcement attention added pressure even without immediate arrests. Jake landed at the airport 36 hours later. Tom drove me to pick him up while Sarah remained with Emma. The reunion was quiet, intense, filled with unspoken understanding. Jake had received the evidence during his journey home. He knew the full scope of his closest friend's betrayal. The pain in his eyes mingled with rage and relief. Back home, Jake held Emma while reviewing the physical evidence. His hands trembled reading Marcus's notebook, seeing the calculated destruction of our family. The neighbor network afforded them space while maintaining protective watch. Marcus's car had not been seen in 24 hours, but vigilance continued. Jake's command mandated counseling for our family. The sessions aided in processing the trauma, rebuilding trust, establishing new boundaries. The therapist specialized in deployment-related family issues. She had witnessed similar situations, understood the unique vulnerabilities military families faced. Professional support complemented community protection. Diane felt empowered to revisit her custody case. The new evidence about Marcus's pattern of behavior strengthened her position. Her lawyer filed motions citing the documented harassment of multiple families. The legal system that had failed her previously now possessed substantial evidence of Marcus's true nature. 3 weeks after Jake's return, life settled into new rhythms. The neighbor network evolved into genuine friendships, forged through crisis. Regular dinners, shared childcare, mutual support replaced the emergency surveillance. Marcus's actions had inadvertently created the community he had attempted to isolate me from. Marcus's absence was confirmed when his house went on the market. He had departed the area, unable to sustain his life amidst total social exile. No forwarding address was provided. His departure brought relief tinged with vigilance. Predators often relocated to new hunting grounds rather than altering their nature. The military spouse network incorporated lessons learned into newcomer briefings. Warning signs of predatory behavior, the significance of community connections, resources for those experiencing manipulation, all became standard topics. Marcus had inadvertently strengthened the very community he tried to exploit. Our marriage emerged stronger for enduring the ordeal. Jake's trust in me never wavered once he knew the truth. We established new communication protocols for future deployments, including multiple backup channels Marcus could not intercept. The experience taught us both about vulnerability and resilience. Emma gradually forgot Uncle Marcus as positive figures filled her life. The adopted aunts and uncles from our neighbor network provided healthy relationship models. Her drawings shifted from frightening figures to happy families, protective communities, safety, and numbers. Children's resilience continued to amaze. 6 months later, Diane regained joint custody of her children. Marcus's documented pattern of manipulation helped substantiate her original claims. The victory was bittersweet. Years lost could not be recovered, but future protection was established. Her children would know their mother fought for them. The spouse support group I joined focused on deployment challenges and predatory behavior recognition. Sharing our story helped others identify similar patterns in their lives. 2 women came forward about concerning behavior from men who had offered to help during deployments. Early intervention prevented potential escalation. Jake and I privately renewed our vows, recommitting after surviving Marcus's assault on our marriage. The ceremony was small, just family and the neighbors who had become family. No elaborate reception, no public display, just quiet acknowledgement of bonds tested and proven strong. Marcus's notebook became evidence in 3 separate custody evaluations as his victims sought to safeguard their children. The meticulous documentation he had created to harm others ultimately revealed his predatory patterns. Legal systems across multiple jurisdictions recognized his methods. Our story disseminated through military spouse networks as a cautionary tale and an empowerment narrative, not through media or fame, but through quiet conversations, private messages, whispered warnings. Women learned to recognize isolation tactics, documentation manipulation, the slow tightening of control. The community protection model we developed was adopted informally by other neighborhoods. Spouse networks created buddy systems, check-in protocols, documentation standards. Marcus's legacy was the defensive structures built to prevent others like him from succeeding. I returned to work part-time once stability resumed. My employer welcomed me back, understanding now why I had required sudden leave. Coworkers who had received strange messages about my mental health comprehended the truth. Professional life resumed with new appreciation for workplace support. Jake's unit implemented family readiness briefings about predatory behavior during deployment. The command recognized vulnerability periods and created protective protocols. Official channels that Marcus had tried to exploit were reinforced against manipulation. Peace arrived gradually. Hypervigilance faded as months passed without incident. The security cameras remained, but checking them became routine rather than obsessive. Trust rebuilt slowly but steadily. The community bonds forged in crisis evolved into lasting friendships based on more than shared threat. Emma started kindergarten with confidence, surrounded by her protective community. Her teacher was briefed about our history, alert to any concerning contacts. The school's robust security policies provided reassurance. Emma thrived in an environment where safety was prioritized. Diane's children visited during summer break, their relationship with their mother healing. Watching them play with Emma evoked complex emotions: grief for lost years, joy for recovered connections, hope for healing. The children's laughter filled our backyard, a sound Marcus had attempted to silence. The final military spouse meeting I attended before Jake's next deployment focused on community resilience. Women shared resources, contact information, support strategies. The network Marcus had compelled us to build became our greatest strength. His attempt to isolate had created unbreakable connections. Jake deployed again 8 months later. This time, communication flowed freely through multiple channels. The neighbor network activated naturally, checking in without the desperate edge of before. Marcus's shadow no longer loomed over routine deployments. We had learned to protect ourselves. I slept peacefully for the first time in over a year. No cars idling outside, no unexpected visits, no manipulation disguised as help. The simple tranquility of an unmonitored life felt like a luxury. Emma slept soundly down the hall, safe in her home, protected by a community that Marcus had inadvertently helped create. His defeat was complete, not through legal action or dramatic confrontation, but through the quiet power of truth, community, and a mother's fierce devotion. The monster who wore a friend's face had been exposed and exiled, leaving behind stronger bonds than he had tried to break.